we're bringing a new trade case against China. This case involves something called rare earth materials, which are used by American manufacturers to make high-tech products like advanced batteries that power everything from hybrid cars to cell phones. We want our companies building those products right here in America. But to do that, American manufacturers need to have access to rare earth materials, which China supplies.
I will make this statement, and hopefully nobody throws anything at me, but I would go so far as to say there is no rare earth shortage. Here's a letter from the University of Southern Florida, reconfirmed previous studies. They basically throw away 22,000 tons of rare earths every year due to thorium content. So assuming you had a 50% recovery, that basically covers 100% of US's current consumption needs. I met John about 3 years ago. I was trying to figure out what you do with the thorium byproduct, which is a serious problem for the rare earth mining industry. John's going to introduce a resolution to the thorium problem, essentially an answer to the United States energy problem.
So I'm John Kutch. I started the Thorium Energy Alliance with a few other folks. We want to assist in restarting rare earth production in the United States.
If you resolve the thorium problem, you've resolved the rare earth problem. U.S. policy related to thorium essentially guarantees that China will continue to control the rare earth market. And that's because monazites, which are always, almost always, Tony, associated with thorium, are also an excellent source of heavy rare earths. In fact, if you look at it on an aggregate basis, that's the #1 source for heavies. If we can't access those sources, we're essentially left with bastnasite carbonatites as the primary source, and they are not good sources for heavies. And that essentially leaves China in the driver's seat on heavies. The truth of the matter is, none of the bills actually resolve the problems that exist with U.S. rare earth production. I sat down with Senator Evan Bayh's staff and the senator, and in the end, he basically said, I don't want to use the word thorium in a piece of legislation because it's going to attract attention. How radioactive is thorium?
Let's talk just a moment about radioactivity, because I had an erroneous notion of what radioactivity was. I thought that if you had something that had like a half-life of a day, and you had something that had a half-life of 1,000,000 years, it meant that the dude that was radioactive for a day is like for a day, and then I'm done. And the dude who's half-life for 1,000,000 years is like for 1,000,000 years, and then done. Okay, so you go, well, which one of these is more dangerous? Well, definitely the one that's got a half-life of 1,000,000 years, because that's got to be like radioactive forever, and the dude that's radioactive for a day, that's not a big deal, right? Completely wrong. Okay, utterly backwards. The dude who's radioactive for a day is really, really radioactive. The dude who's radioactive for 1,000,000 years is hardly radioactive at all. Which one of those two is more dangerous? The one that's radioactive for a day, by a long shot. Okay, so your radioactivity is directly and inversely proportional to your half-life. So all these guys who have real short half-lives, very, very dangerous. But they're going away real quick. This guy, 2.3 million years, no problem. It's not going to hurt you. It's just not nearly radioactive enough.
That's where that no such thing as safe radiation, that comes from the linear no threshold hypothesis. It is established in regulation, yet there is no epidemiological data to back that up. There is no study that says we have taken a cohort of people and we've exposed them to 1% more radiation than normally would get, and we've seen 1% more cancer. In fact, there are many places in the world where background levels of radiation are substantially higher. If the linear no threshold hypothesis was in fact true, or even approaching truth, you would see statistically significantly higher levels of cancer in those populations, those cohorts. But what happens? Not only is there not higher levels of cancer, there are actually suppressed levels of cancer, which leads to a theory that does have substantiation in the data, and that's called hormesis. Hormesis is simply a little bit is good for you. And radiation appears to be one of these things where a little bit more is actually good for you and suppresses your development of cancer. You might say, well, why would a little bit of radiation be good for me? When you go and exercise, you damage your muscles, but your body rebuilds them and rebuilds them stronger than they were before. Radiation stimulates cellular damage, but it also stimulates the body's repair mechanisms. If hormesis became policy instead of linear no threshold, we would have an incredibly different approach to radiation.
The staff are generally fairly good at understanding what the issues are. Republican or Democrat, when you're on the Energy Committee, you generally take it seriously and hire some good staff. And the staff understand. They just then they say, yep, but it's an election year, or there's some other political reason why we
Thorium's
can't do this.
radioactive. Do you want to support anything radioactive?
Yeah, it'll put the stink on us. These things work. There's no physical reason why they don't work. It's the interference of man's bureaucracy that keeps us from doing this. Republicans and Democrats both agree, makes perfect sense, and yet we still can't get introduced legislation, and it's just thorium isn't dangerous to work with, handle, or store. That's what our legislation that we're pushing with says. Tiny little pebble that holds back this giant boulder of innovation. And once you do that, all of a sudden, boop, that pebble comes out, and we restart rare earth. We open up the possibility for thorium energy. Everything starts happening from that point on.
That solves the rare earth problem. Bring jobs and direct investment back into the United States. Where we're going, and what I think is much more important, proposed language creates a regulatory pathway for thorium energy under a federally chartered corporation. This reactor, it works forever because fuel is a byproduct from the mining industry.